Jai Anilo Premadano Paramakacho Anjana Shabakaya Chaksugavadatam Jena Tasmai Sivaya Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manodistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadam Mayam Dadati Swavandantikam Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, entitled Lord Krishna's Entrance into Dwarka. Text number 24. Raja Margam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriyaha Hamayani Arurur Vipra Ta Ikshana Mahotsavaha Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriyaha Karmyani Arurur Vipra Tat Ikshana Mahotsavaha Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriyaha Karmyanyarur Vipra Tat Ikshana Mahotsavaha
Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya Ananya Guravipra Karishana Mahotsava
Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya Arnyai Arurur Vipra Krishna Mahotsava
Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya Tikshana Mahotsava Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya
Raja, ladies.
Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya Agyani Aruru Vipra Atishana Mahotsavaha Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dvarakaya Kulastriya
Rajamargam the public roads, Gate, while passing over, Krishna, by Lord Krishna, Dvarakaya, of the city of Dwarka, Kulastriya, ladies of the respectable family, Harmyani, on the palaces, Aruruhu, got up, Vipra, oh remnants, Tatikshana, just to look upon Krishna, Mahautsavaha, accepted as the greatest festival. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When Lord Krishna passed over the public roads, all the ladies from the respectable families of Dwarka went up to the roofs of their palaces just to have a look at the Lord. They considered this to be the greatest festival. Purport. To have a look at the Lord is a great festive occasion, undoubtedly, as it was considered by the metropolitan ladies of Dwarka. This is still followed by the devout ladies of India, especially during the days of Julan and Janmashtami ceremonies. The ladies of India still throng up in greatest number at the temple of the Lord, where his transcendental eternal form is worshipped. The transcendental form of the Lord installed in a temple is not different from the Lord personally. Such a form of the Lord is called Archa Vigraha, or Archa Incarnation, and is expanded by the Lord by his internal potency, just to facilitate the devotional service of his innumerable devotees who are in the material world. The material senses cannot perceive the spiritual nature of the Lord, and therefore the Lord accepts the Archa Vigraha, which is apparently made of material elements like earth, wood, and stone, but actually there is no material contamination. The Lord being Kaivalya, one alone, there is no matter in him. He is one without second, and therefore the Almighty Lord can appear in any form without being contaminated by the material conception. Therefore, festivities in the temple of the Lord as held generally are like festivals performed during the manifestive days of the Lord at Dwarka, about 5,000 years ago. The authorized acharyas who know the science perfectly install such temples of the Lord under regulative principles just to offer facilities to the common man. The persons who are less intelligent without being conversant with the science mistake this great attempt to be idol worship and poke their nose into that which they have no access. Therefore, the ladies or men who observe festivals in the temples of the Lord just to have a look at the transcendental form are 1,000 times more glorious than those who are non-believers in the transcendental form of the Lord. It appears from this verse that the inhabitants of Dwarka were all owners of big palaces. This indicates the prosperity of the city. The ladies got up on the roofs just to have a look at the procession and the Lord. The ladies did not mix with the crowd on the street, and thus their respectability was perfectly observed. There was no artificial equality with the man. Female respectability is preserved more elegantly by keeping the women separate from the men. The sexes should not mix unrestrictedly. So we have a description here of Lord Krishna's entrance into the metropolitan area of Dwarka. Just like we have a metroplex, big place. What is the derivation of the word metro? But what is the Latin? Anyway, In any case, at least it's understood today to be an area which is highly populated. And so, although we sometimes get the impression that there were a few areas which were developed ancient civilizations, but generally we don't hear so much in detail as we do from the Bhagavatam. When they do anthropological digs, they come up with, only fragmentary evidence of these lost civilizations, and so they have to speculate like anything. Just like as we look at India, they have this Harappa, civilization in the Indus Valley, and they speculate so many things about it. They can't exactly understand it. They admit they don't understand it, they don't know, there's so much we really don't know about it. And you might ask, well, why don't they just read the Bhagavatam? Make it so much easier. In other words, here's the scripture, here's the book, the history. The Puranas are history books, itihasas. Here are the history books about these civilizations, written by the persons of those civilizations, and yet they refuse to look at them, saying that these are not books written during those times. They are not the books written by the persons of those civilizations. They're modern interpolations. And just to give a sense of antiquity, they imitate language of old. They purposely imitate older forms of language, even though they're written in modern time. So in this way, you can see the inferiority of Eastern and Indian civilization is maintained, and the superiority of, the Euro-centered theory that everything that came out of Europe was where it was at. It was the, cradle of real culture and civilization. That's what they said. They say India was populated by Europeans originally. There were some persons living there who were driven out of their Harappan civilization and went into civilization and went south and became Europeans. I mean, this is the main theory. They have some other theories. But anyway, the people who gradually dominated the Aryans were Europeans. So whatever is good is made in remains. So the British policy was like that in India, that even in Calcutta and Bengal, where they would make very finely spun, homespun cloth of the finest type, they would export it to England and then re-import it back to India with a stamp which said made from England, from London, and charge 100 times more for the price of something that was manufactured, a few miles away. So this is a type of psychological, manipulation of the national consciousness, and it goes on even today. It goes on. You buy so many different products, and you have to really look hard to finally see it says made in China, made somewhere. And people say, I'm not going to buy a farm before I'm only going to buy American. People have such strong nationalistic sentiments. In any case, this description today gives us a very clear picture of very advanced society, because it says it was a metroplex, very big city. A big city means big organization. You can't have a lot of people living together in a civilized way without some very expert management, systems of management. So we have to understand that there was a very involved system of management, waterworks, just like they make a big deal about the aqueducts in some countries, right? Roman aqueducts, I think it was. How they moved water from place to place. Or, for example, in the civilization of the Indus Valley, I believe it was, they made a big deal about the gutters, how they remove wastewater. They were impressed by that. These are signs of intelligence. And, of course, if they would just read, they would see that there's a lot more signs of intelligence, because the real intelligence is not how to manage, the water that goes into your body and the water that goes out of your body. That doesn't, perhaps it does take some planning when it's done by a million or more people at the same location. But the fact is, it's not a very interesting subject. The real interesting subject is how to get out of this material world. And because the Bhagavatam and the Vedas are especially concerned with that subject, most historians don't take any interest. They think immediately, a myth. Anything that has to do with God, they immediately categorize, this is a myth, because it has to do with God, and God is a myth. We've already proven that God is a myth. We've figured out that the universe works by mathematical laws, and it doesn't require God's presence. Things are going on without His presence. So there's no need of God. And besides that, whatever God can do, we can do, and we can usually do it better. And whatever we haven't figured out yet, we're about to figure out. So really, it doesn't seem that there's God. God is a myth. This is a nonsense which is, basically underlying why people don't take seriously scriptural statements. They believe that anything which simply is about the subject of God is mythological. Gods and heroes. Of course, they're quite interested in their own myths. All you have to do is read the myths, the myths and heroes, like today's heroes are politicians. You open up the magazine, you see such and such Democratic hero, such and such Republican hero, and all of their extended family members who are the heroines and how they assist them, or music heroes, or sports heroes, or given, and they're real. They're very real. They're very real, and the God of the temple or the church, we only admit that his need to admit to his existence once in a rare while, perhaps on Sunday. You go where you pray for a few minutes. So this is the situation as the Kali Yuga develops. Here, of course, we had a different civilization, the time during the Vedic culture, when everything was God-centered. Everything was God-centered. And ISKCON is special because even though it is a modern movement, it harks back to a very ancient time when people had a God-centered life. So sociologists, and anthropologists and other philosophers and religionists actually have a great deal of interest in ISKCON. And one of the reasons they do is they think that this is very unusual. How they feel that by looking at ISKCON, you can get some sense of what may have gone on thousands of years ago when people lived in a God-centered society. Things were very certain, very well established, clear, harmonious. You read, for example, the philosophy of Aristotle, and he has this idea that everything, seeks out its own purpose, he explained everything that way, that each thing has its own intrinsic purpose and moves towards that end. And so the universe was seen as a very coordinated, meaningful, personal, being, almost like an animal. Maybe you can see it like an animal. But from animal it went to mechanical. They took out the personal element and said that there's no question of each object or each thing moving toward its own fulfillment. Everything's just moving by mathematics. Mathematical equations can explain everything. The universe is like a great clock. And, somehow or other the clock just existed. Never mind that there was a clock maker. Like there's no clock that we can find anywhere in this world that wasn't made by someone. But this particular universal clock just somehow came into being at some point. Something kind of came into being, which they don't know how. They can possibly have many ideas about how it developed from one stage to another, but how it began from the very, very start, no idea. No idea. And that's not scientific purpose. That is not scientific. Scientist means someone who searches out the original cause, not the second step and the third step, the original cause. Until you can understand the original cause, why do you go to the second and third step? And you may say, well, we're going backwards. We're going to go move backwards and find it. But you will not come to that original cause by any kind of empirical observation. And that's basically, so much of what science has been up to now is empirical observation. Of course, physics has become such a science that it's getting closer now to more Vedic conceptions. They have to, because it's not based anymore simply on physical observation. Anyway, when we study Western civilization, we do see that it goes through many phases, but the basic primary change in Western civilization is from religious to secular, from believing in God, and God at the center, to no God, godless. And therefore you have reactionary religious movements, just like now there's presidential, hopeful Republican, hopeful. He's like a super conservative evangelist, right? And it's just people they like some of the things he stands for, but they're scared stiff because he's a fundamentalist. And fundamentalists are notoriously dangerous creatures. They can be very dangerous because whenever you study history, you'll see that anyone who believes too strongly in one thing does not usually that person is not very tolerant of other things. And so they can become a very dangerous situation. People don't know exactly how to deal with this. They like some of the things he says, yet at the same time, they are fearful. Just like here's an issue about the ladies of Dwarka and how they observed Krishna's coming. They stood on the rooftops. The Prabhupada makes some very clear statements here. He says that they did not mix with the crowd on the street. They could have a number of them. What would you say that means? What does it imply? That there's no artificial equality. Yeah?
I can say as long as society where men are saying to women that yes, you can work on things, you can compete in the love market, but actually they're looking very split.
But, okay, that's true what you're saying. Now, if we just look at the words, no artificial equality, what does the implication mean?
That there is real equality.
That there is real equality, that's one meaning. Or it could also mean that there is no real equality. But certainly there's also no artificial equality. So there are two possible ways to see what the implication, what the actual implication is. There is real equality, as you're saying, but not this artificial equality. What is the artificial equality? Prabhupada says, no artificial equality with the man. Female respectability is preserved more eloquently in keeping women separate from the man. The sexes should not mix unrestrictedly. So, this is like the main or big issue of the day. It really is a big issue of the day. When you take any subject in the university, there is always, no matter what the subject is, some part of it is generally devoted towards, the issue of equal rights for women, feminism. And everybody has their own explanation for it. But the reality is that they want total mixing, no gender differentiation, unisex. Just like you see unisex barbers, isn't it? Unisex clothing, unisex toilets, unisex dormitories. You know, the whole idea is that the only way you'll have equality is by eliminating differences. But that's nonsense. Our philosophy is different than that. We say we will agree to disagree. There is unity in diversity. The only way to get unity is not by eliminating differences. Another way is by accepting the differences and not judging them in a qualitative way of saying one is better than the other. Just like you can't say a man is better than a woman. You can say a man is different than a woman. And you can judge one woman against another woman, if you wanted to, or one man against another man, in terms of certain ways. And you can judge them against each other also, for that matter. But the fact is that the issue is not so much who's better or who's worse, but they're different. And one difference is, and the main principal difference is sex. They are constructed different sexually. And so, because of that physical difference, and because of how much a person is identified with their body, the mind is absorbed in the differences of the body. And so, a person in a man's body thinks, I'm a man, and someone in a woman's body thinks I'm a woman, and so they get attracted to the opposites. At least they used to. Nowadays, people get attracted to anything, including, anything. It doesn't even have to be human, and it doesn't even have to be alive. People have become so sexually active, more than any animals are, because animals know very well what they want. They want their own type. But human beings have become completely, insane. Part of the reason is this, this absorption, fixation in this, it's like someone who has been deprived of equality for so long, so everybody goes crazy trying to figure out the way now how to really make them equal. And they don't get to the right answer. So the right answer is not, that we will just mix up, because by mixing up, all that happens is everybody gets agitated. When you put fire near butter, one will melt the other. So because of this random mixing of the sexes, just so much encouragement towards it, you see with what happens like at a modern day university, that students cannot concentrate on their studies. All that they're interested in is dating. That's their main interest. Sex. You go to the university so that you can get away from your parents and have more sex life, which is the most outrageous, perversion of what universities used to be before. That's why universities originally were not co-education. Because they knew very well that you don't mix the sexes together if you want to seriously educate people who are older, because they're going to get absorbed on a bodily platform. So they did maintain this, and we do so today. And because of that, we'll get criticized. We do get criticized. Our movement gets criticized as being sexist. So the first question is, why are the men standing closer to the altar than the women? That's the question. Of course, I have my answer, which is that they aren't necessarily having to do that like in Houston. They don't do that. Because our temple is not very wide. It's just a very long temple. Like in Mayapur, they don't do that. The men stand on one side, and the women stand on the other. They don't go back. So it's just practical. The necessity is, of course, someone could argue, well, then why don't you let the women stay up front half of the week, and the men can be up front on the other? Because we're a little bit sexist, that's right. I can't give you any other answer except the truth. That is the truth. Or I could answer, because more men come to Mongol arts than women. Of course, the women would say, well, more women come to the greeting than deity. We should be up front. In any case, basically we are not sexist. And anyone who makes a careful study, I always say this, will find that out. It's not a fact. In fact, unless one talks about the soul, you can't talk about equality. It'll always be a perverted type of equality. Because we do see each person here as a spirit soul with the equal ability and right to love Krishna and be able to be recognized by Krishna, irrespective of their physical, gender identity. Therefore, that is the ability to actually give equality to persons. So we observe this Vedic culture was set up to properly. It was set up very nicely. It situated persons in a proper way to show respect to all living entities. And ladies were highly respected. Female respectability is preserved more elegantly by keeping women separate from the men. How is there any elegance in unisex? Where's the elegance in, a woman's, they cut their hair short, wear, suits, do the, goes on and on and on and on. We had a discussion in one class, and finally I just raised my hand and I made a simple observation, which made everybody laugh, that the real cause of, modern day feminist movement was the invention of powdered milk. That was my offering to the class. That by evaporation of milk, women could leave the home and go to work. And if they hadn't been able to do that, there was no question women would go home, because they would have to stay home to feed their babies their milk. So science does affect these changes. But the fact is that we can offer the world an ideal model in ISKCON, and that's what ISKCON is meant to do. It's not simply a philosophy in a book, but it's meant to be lived properly. And that depends on all of us, how far we're able to live properly and articulate the philosophy nicely, because people will ask us. These questions are on the minds of those who come to this temple. Why is it that women sit separately from the men? You have to be able to explain this in a reasonable fashion. Why do you worship these idols? This question comes up right in the purport, and it's the main question someone asks if they come into this temple and the deity business are open. Is this idolatry? And but spends a lot of time in his purports discussing what the reason for deity worship is. And he makes the point that the Lord can appear in any form. So we can give statements, there are statements from Christian books, like Moses saw the Lord in a burning bush. God appeared to Moses in a burning bush. And every Christian and Jew knows that. So they can't argue, God cannot appear in many forms because he did appear. And there are other times when he appeared in different forms. And of course they may say that he ultimately doesn't have a form, but there is nowhere that idea is really emphasized in their scriptures. That God has no form. When you call God the Father, that very clearly designates a form. Fire hydrants don't have fathers. Air doesn't have father. Who has a father? A son has a father. A daughter has a father. Children have fathers. And what does a father mean? There must be a mother. And these are just common sense. Just take this word father that everyone accepts. God the Father. And it's a very common theme. The Creator. Even when you talk about the Creator, you see the conception is still personal. It's not impersonal, but it's very hard. This whole conception that is an impersonalized idea of God, it doesn't come from their scriptures. It comes from their own inability to understand and accept their scriptures and have realized persons. explain their scriptures. So we're going to have to explain very carefully our philosophy and try to touch on some of the themes in their own philosophy so they can relate to it. And give them extensive knowledge. We have extensive knowledge, which is one of the greatest contributions our movement can make, is to distribute widely this knowledge. That's why Srila Prabhupada emphasized book distribution so much, because these books contain knowledge that is unavailable in any other literature in the world. There's no other literature, religious literature, that explains reincarnation, the law of karma, for example. And anyone who's a good philosopher has to admit the law of karma is the best explanation for many things which don't make sense, like senseless evil. Cannot be explained except by the law. Because senseless evil means when an airplane blows up in the sky and 300-400 people lose their lives, what's the point? If there's a God, why did he let it happen? What's the point? When a little baby dies sitting in its mother's lap in an airplane explosion, what's the point? How can that be fair? Where's the morality? There it is fair, because something happened in the past. Only karma can explain why this was not senseless evil. And philosophers will, have to come to grips with that fact that they're unbiased. But there's a reason why Prabhupada's emphasizing the distribution of his books, because he knows that gradually the public, as a whole, will become educated through reading these books and start to put two and two together. Even if their leaders don't do it for them, they'll do it. And karma now is pretty much an accepted concept by the majority of people accept the idea of karma and reincarnation. And they didn't 30 years ago. When this movement began in America, people did not accept karma and reincarnation. Maybe, 5% of the population in America accepted. What are the figures show now? How many people accept the idea of reincarnation in the United States? I think it's more than 50%. It's 70%. And it's a very high percentage of people accept reincarnation. It's a very, very high number. So how is that? One of the main reasons is Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada's books are having very, very powerful influence. And that's why Prabhupada just said, keep pushing the books out. Vegetarianism has had a very big influence. Again, Prabhupada said, we don't need more temples, we need more restaurants and reading rooms. That's what he told them. He said, don't open more temples, open restaurants and reading rooms. He said, if 10%, he told me this person in 1977, he said, if you can influence 10% of the U.S. population to give up eating meat, he said the entire atmosphere of the world will change, meaning that the United States influences the rest of the world. And 10% of the population, if they just become vegetarians, that in itself would be very powerful. So, these, and of course Harinam, which we don't do enough of, but which is so important. And people like Harinam. It really does have its effect. Chanting Hare Krishna. It has a very powerful effect. If we would go out more often, now the weather's getting warmer, at least once a week, we should go out. Because the names of the Lord are very, very powerful and purifying. So these are the three-pronged point of our preaching tack. And we should see ourselves as preachers. It's not enough just to go through the week. All you do is go through the week, making ends meet, making a living, chanting your rounds. And you may think that's a great achievement. I chanted my 16 rounds today. Okay, it is a great achievement, but it may not be enough to save the world. I mean, your chanting may not be quite like, Harinam Sthakur's chanting, or, Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj's chanting, where they can pray for the deliverance of the world. Usually when we chant, the only thing we're praying for is that I don't fall asleep. or that my mind doesn't think, like there's 75 different things, in each realm. So it's questionable whether your chanting is delivering doubts. It may keep you awake, and it might even advance you to some degree. Therefore, it would be beneficial if, in addition to chanting the 16 rounds, you did something to spread Krishna consciousness. And, all right, but, I think each person can justify that they are doing something. A pujari can say so, and a Gurukul teacher can say so, and someone working in a restaurant can say so. So I think that's the greatness of this movement, that it has set itself up in a way where just by being part of this movement, you are doing something. I would only argue that you can do more. It's like, for example, no doubt anyone who does come to the restaurant does get benefit, but very few people do come to the restaurant. So you can think about that. And no doubt, if you go up, give people books, they get benefit, but very few people get books. And it is still very few. We count, 17 soft books, 3 hard books, 1 month. You think of the Metroplex. It's a very big place. So, we are just barely, it's like, the amount of books we distributed on the amount of snow that fell yesterday. You must have seen all the snow that fell the night before last, right? That's what they reported to us. Rain, snow, or sleet. And you look and look and look and nothing fell. So trees, you can walk between the snowflakes when it snows usually now. There's just not much snow. In the same way, our book distribution is quite sparse. Doesn't blanket the city. So we have to increase these preachings, Again, we have our Indian community, and they are already inclined towards Krishna consciousness. They simply need to be encouraged. So, and if we befriend people, because what does preaching mean? What does sales mean? That's a salesman. What's salesmanship?
Relation.
Yeah, it's relationships, right? And what do they say?
Establishing and maintaining relationships.
And what do they say about fundraising? It's friend raising. Right? Fundraising means friend raising. So, for example, you have a huge, I just give you an example, on Sunday you have a large congregation of people come here. Okay? And in the sanctuary where they take the prasadam, especially amongst the Indian community, they're all sitting there. And you'd be surprised how thrilled Indian people are when a Westerner comes up to them, just befriends them as a devotee and tells them their story as a devotee. That's very endearing. They love that because it's not very nice to meet someone. There's the British and America itself here, puts down such a heavy thing about American superiority. The American way of life is the best, and here are Americans who have embraced the Indian way of life. So naturally, any Indian will appreciate that if you just take the time to spend a little time and be friendly. But if you think Sunday's my day off, I've been working 5-6 days a week, and Sunday is when I can just stay at home and not have to bother with anything. That is one type of vacation, no doubt. But I would suggest that you might actually feel more relaxed by spending a little time Sunday preaching. You just might find more relaxation and more happiness in going into the sanctuary, having your Sunday feast, and just, push yourself into some unsuspecting Indian family. And I say, would you mind if I sat next to you? Then, because of their nice culture, they'll never say yes. I don't want to be nervous behind. Why some American might say, no, this seat is reserved. Will not say that. They'll say, yeah, please sit down. Then you can ask their name and talk. I say this, and I have said it in the past, and the reason I have to say it again is because no one takes me seriously about this. But I do think that the atmosphere and the effectiveness of our preaching would be markedly improved if everybody would do something about it. Just like, we have our fathers sitting there sleeping in the class, being given a nudge. Just like our young people, if they would take it upon themselves, and, meet the young people of the Indian community as an example, which they don't do, you would find very intelligent people. They're always very intelligent, motivated, they're very intelligent, and they would probably like very much to have a friend like you. And it probably would help them to become Krishna conscious. But you have to take the trouble, you have to bother them. If you don't bother them, then nothing's going to happen. So instead of whiling away your teenage life, talking sweet nothings, with your girlfriend or boyfriend, it would be a lot more intelligent to use the time to do some, help to others. Be charitable, be kind, be generous with what you have. You young people, you have been spoon-fed for 15, 16, 17 years, a huge amount of Krishna consciousness. It's like enough to last thousands of people, thousands of years. And you're just full of Krishna consciousness. If you just meet somebody who was interested, you could tell them all about it. So you just have to go out. That's what preaching means. People are interested. They are interested in what we have. They're just not going to run up to you and shake you and say, tell me about it, tell me about it. You have to be a little smart and get them to, it's like priming a pump. You ever prime a pump? At least I have tried, folks, because it's mine for you. Priming a pump, the water doesn't just start coming out. You have to prime the pump to get the water to come out. So in the same way, you have to prime people to get them to start asking questions. They're not just going to run over and say, oh, I've been waiting to meet someone. And sometimes it happens. In fact, it does happen. You usually think that person's weird. Anybody that's, they say it's, I think they say that, right? Anyone who's too anxious, too eager is suspect. So, if someone runs up to you with that much eagerness, usually they just, a weirdo. The best people are usually those who are a little, careful and cautious. So you have to prime the pump. You have to go over to them in a bit of a subtle way and just say, may I sit down? And then just, ask for the names and start to talk, and things will happen. So I would only suggest that we have worked so hard to build this community. We are working so hard to tolerate living in this community, because it is a toleration. It does require toleration. We've put so much effort into making this community what it is. Now we should use it. What's the point of doing everything we did if we don't market it? And then you can say, oh, well, we don't have enough money to market it, or we don't have. I say the marketing is, what are you talking about? We've got hundreds and hundreds of people who come in to this community every week, and we don't market it to them. We just, sit there. I don't know. It's like, it's like a businessman manufactures the products, rents the place, showcases it all. The place is full of customers, right? And everybody just stays at home eating their meal. Does that make any sense? That's what we do. You know how hard it was to build this temple room, how much it cost, the trouble it took. You know what it takes to dress the deities, how much time we have to spend on that, making the deity outfits, how much time the cooks spend cooking, how much time it took to run the restaurant, cooks there working, right? The maintaining the grounds, paying the rent, you're all paying rent on houses. It takes so much trouble. So finally we get some people to come in here and everybody sits at home. I mean, think about it. It doesn't make any sense. It actually, we are, weird. We're the weirdos. And that is completely weird to do that. It doesn't make any sense. So I think the real problem is that we don't actually understand that preaching is the essence. That preaching is pleasurable. I mean, it's like there are very, very few people that really do work on Sunday. I'm one of the few people I can claim that actually works on Sundays. And anybody who's been out to my course knows it. You know, I work 10 hours on Sunday with what I study and stuff. And I think I'm one of the few people who has a legitimate excuse why I may not do what I'm talking about on Sunday. I don't think most of you are in that category. I think that, you know, and you can say, no, we are. We're catching up with our housework. I don't buy that you're catching up with the housework at 6 o'clock on Sunday evening. I don't believe it. There's at least 60 or 70 adults in this community, and if 60 or 70 adults were active preachers, you know, for about 2 hours every Sunday, I think you'd see some very interesting results, personally. Very interesting results. You know, you'd be surprised. Just like Maharaj met one gentleman, Indian gentleman, he started to talk about how, he said, you know, the older people right now, they want a place, older Indian community members, want a place where they can go for the weekend. And then they go down up to some place down, such and such a place where they build a community. I don't want to give it credence by mentioning the name of the place. But anyway, you know, so the guy said, if you would build something here, we can build it, we can collect the money. So they started talking about property they could buy right around here and build it, you know. So Narottam is now going to get into it, see if they're serious. But the point being, my point being, that people do have desire for religious activities. Every religion has many religious activities, like Sunday schools, you know, which again, by the way, we don't have. We tried it, but it didn't work. Although in Houston it works. You know, they're building in Houston, that temple there, that property we're building in Houston, which you'll see when we go down there. It's costing $1 million to build that building. And there are 10 classrooms. A big part of the building they're building are Sunday school classrooms, because they cannot hold all the Sunday students. Now, you know, I'd like to know how it is that they can do that. We don't. What is the explanation? And the explanation, obviously, is they care. They care. They've gone out of their way to create that situation. And I would suspect, I'm trying to tell you, that Indian people, Hindus, are no different than Christians. They've got a lot of, you know, religious things they want to do. And they're just looking for a temple that will facilitate it. But if I'm trying to say to you, you can say, well, that's not our business, facilitate all the things they want to do. Everything you facilitate that they want to do will have some connection with Krishna. That's my point. Just like you think that everybody goes to the restaurant is just coming here to be Krishna conscious. No. But can anybody doubt the fact that when someone goes to our restaurant that they're getting Krishna conscious? They're getting Krishna conscious. Similarly, you know, Sunday schools are Krishna conscious. I'm just giving an example. I'm doing any example I can give. Like old people wanting something to do. You know, so if you build a building and they can all come on the weekend to stay there together, what do you think they're going to do on those weekends? Just sit in their rooms? No, they'll be here in the temple. You can then ask them if there are other things, services they can do. They'll do all kinds of services. If you have mail outs, you want to they'll do that. It goes on and on and on. I mean, there's unlimited things they can do, and that's true of anyone. But it all requires our own interest in preaching. And everybody here feels I'm just too busy, I don't have the time. Well, I say, okay, give us 2 or 3 hours a week. You don't have 2 or 3 hours a week. Is it really the fact? And you know that's not so. Could you just say, oh, we've heard this so many times. Well, you won't have to hear it so many times, you just start doing it. So my, request is like that. And I do think that Sundays especially is the time, no matter what you're doing, even if you're a book distributor, like some of you are, that doesn't mean that I've done it, or like, Jeevan would say, well, I give the Sunday lecture, so I don't have to do what you're talking about. That's all right. Whatever you do, but in addition to that, is what I'm saying. In addition to whatever you're doing for preaching, or not doing, you should also mix a little bit on Sundays. I mean, that was the old traditional Sunday feast. It's not. The big deal was you worked really hard the Sunday, because Sunday was the day we got everybody to come. And there wasn't a single devotee that didn't plop themselves down next to a guest and start preaching. And that was what the Sunday feast was all about. It was a big happening. Remember? Am I right? Not a single person would not do that. And that was it. Everything was geared up for Sunday feast to get as many people there as possible, and then you just fanned out. And I was very methodical about it. I remember it was so, you could count on it. I think I wrote about that in certain. I went to New York. I flew up to the Sunday feast from Florida up to New York City, put myself in someone's office, I gave a lecture, told people about this program of traveling on the buses. Then I went up to the office. I got a few people to go out and talk with the others. I got people coming in the office, and I went down the next morning back down to Florida. Already when I came to New York, I booked 5 tickets return, and all 5 seats were occupied with young men on the back. And so you can say, that was your preaching. The point I'm making is we did preach. You can preach. There are lots of people. I watch every Sunday during those kirtans. There are also Westerners in there. And there are Indian people who now dance, which is unusual. You might want to talk to them about how you like that dance. Because even if they don't like it, then you need to explain them why it's all right. Because most Indian people think we should just do bhajan and not kirtan. They don't know the difference between bhajan and kirtan. And you have to explain it, and it's beneficial to explain it so that they get it off their mind. That's one of the reasons they don't dance. Because it's not, they just can't. The tradition in most of India is not kirtan, it's bhajan. You sit down and just clap your hands softly. Bhajan. What Bengal does kirtan. Bengalis do kirtan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced kirtan. And there is kirtan traditions in different parts. But you just have to explain that our sampradaya comes through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the tradition in Bengal is kirtan. So that's why we do it. Of course, then they may say, well, I'm not a Bengali, I'm a Gujarati. And so I'll go to such and such temple, not something. But you can tell them, well, look, I'm not a Bengali or a Gujarati. So what does it have to do with Bengali? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not a Bengali, you just have to be patient. You have the opportunity to appear in Bengal. He could have also appeared in Gujarat and introduced, his movement through bhajans. But he understood that bhajans are too subtle. That's why he did kirtan. But bhajans are too subtle. Because it's just too, it's not the right thing for the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga needs kirtan. Because this is a very heavy age of materialism, and therefore requires a very powerful, forceful type of chanting, which gets people off the mental platform. If it was, that's just like you see, during an arti ceremony, everyone stands up. Now you can say that they stand up because, the main reason they stand up is because it's a way of showing respect while the Lord is being offered the arti. But I think that there must be some other reason also, because when you stand up, you don't just stand. It is a fact that people move a little bit, even if they're not accustomed to kirtan. So kirtan is for the Kali Yuga, for anyone. You can always get them off. If they say, I'm not a Bengali, I'm a Gujarati, saying, I'm not even an Indian. So you can argue that you don't have to come here because you're not a Bengali, then I shouldn't be here at all because I'm an American. In this way, engage in discussion, make friends, and of course, most of you, the best thing you can do is if you can invite people to your home sometime. If you make friends and then invite them to your home, most of you never think of it. You'll invite me to your home, but you never think of inviting any of these guests to your home. But if you ever do, you know what Prabhupada said about someone eating in your home? Yes. Prabhupada said that if someone takes prasad, if you feed someone, they become obliged to you. And everyone knows that. And anyone with any culture knows this. When you accept someone's invitation, they become obliged to you. So if you invite people to your home, they become highly obliged. And apart from that, they become very convinced. Many people will not open up and discuss their doubts, etc., in a public place. But in the privacy of someone's home, they'll open it up. I have spoken long enough, there will not be time for questions or comments. Because we went over. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Gaur Purnima ki jai. One thing is that tomorrow is the public celebration for our Gaur Purnima festival. So if there was any day when what I said holds, if you can't do this tomorrow, I mean, I don't think that you're a devotee for Chaitanya. If you can't come out and do some preaching tomorrow, Gaur Purnima is celebrated on Monday officially. That is that is the Gaur Purnima day. But guests will not come on Monday, they're going to come tomorrow. So we are going to bathe Kornitai. And I would suggest, that you get into your best preaching outfit and move and do some good preaching. In this way, please, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaur Premanandi.
Jai.